you. Um, First of all, I want to thank all of you for attending this evening. I really appreciate it. I am excited about talking with you about dementia and how to make it through the holidays and feel better on the other end. I know that's a big concern for most of us that care for people, especially those we love, that are living with one of the many forms of dementia. Now, in my profile, it talked about that there are over 130 types of dementias, when in fact, the Dementia Society of Ireland has said that there are over 400 types of dementia. Now, as we move forward, I'm going to go through pretty quickly because I have a lot of slides and a lot of information. And I hope at the end that you guys will have some questions for me. But there's a reason that I'm talking about the number of the different types of dementia. It's very important as we're dealing with our loved ones to understand what they're going through. So as I said, I'm just going to ask you to hang on. We've got a lot to cover really, really quickly. And please save your questions until we get to the end. So again, as Annette mentioned, tonight we're going to be talking about dementia, including Alzheimer's, and the coping skills that we need through the holidays. So first, I want to just do a quick overview of the different types of dementia. And I always start with looking at the brain because this is where everything takes place. But the reason that I showed this is I really want you to notice that there are actually 4 different areas, or what they call lobes. And each of these areas are very important in helping us to define the type of dementia our loved one is diagnosed with or potentially living with, whether they've been diagnosed or not. You'll see the frontal temporal, that's this front part of the head. You've got the parietal, and that's towards the back. But you'll notice at the very bottom, the occipital, that is where our visual, our sight and that type of thing are take place. And then the temporal, which is right over the ear and here along the front of the head. And as we go further through, I'm going to define these even more for you. So I don't know if you can see with the different mini screens, like with my face and that type of thing. But again, what I'm doing is I'm trying to give you a better idea. And this is going to be on the website, as Chip had mentioned. But I'm trying to give you a better idea of the purpose of each of these lobes and what is taking place. So with the parietal, you know, it's coordinating the sensory information, taste, smell, touch, as you can see. And again, later you can take the time to look at this and really kind of study it if you want. I mean, again, I just assume everybody enjoys looking at this as much as I do. And then this next slide, what I'm doing with this is I'm showing you that in addition to the lobes that we've defined, we have actually begun to understand these dots, if you will. But if you'll look at, for example, the red dots here on this screen, the visual spatial attention at the front, the frontal lobe area, it's kind of in between the frontal and the parietal. But then you'll also see that it's back at the back of the brain as well. So what we're learning about the brain is where we used to think that, for example, mathematical approximations only took place in the frontal lobe. We are understanding now that it also occurs in other areas as well. Why that is important is when someone, for example, may have frontal temporal type dementia that's occurring at the front of the brain, they are still able in some cases to do mathematical problems and that type of thing, even though their dementia is advancing, because of that purple dot that you see at the back of the brain. The brain is just amazing. So what we're really excited about is that as the brain is becoming more and more, what's the word? I should look at one of these dots. As the brain is becoming more and more, help me out here, someone. What's the word I'm looking for? As the dementia is taking over, okay?
Oh,
That if it takes place in one area of the brain, you can still continue to live. And the reason that I really get excited about that is that also explains why we're able to maintain our identity even as the dementia continues to progress. So what is dementia? The official term is a gradual decline in a person's cognitive abilities and behaviors that eventually interfere with normal daily life. So for example, if someone is diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, what they'll do is they'll begin to struggle with how they're able to process words, whether they're able to hear words or speak. Sometimes the different types of memories are affected. And then as the dementia continues to progress, their activities of daily living, their ability to do things like brush their hair, toilet, dress, hold conversations, eat, those things become more and more affected. But it can take up to 20 years. So this isn't something that because someone is diagnosed, that all of a sudden we figure that they are suffering and this is a terrible thing. Most people will be able to continue to engage and talk and communicate with other people, even with the dementia for years and years before it really affects those activities of daily living. Dementia is not a normal part of aging, despite what many people think. Just because you're getting older does not mean that you will have dementia. The other side of this is what we're also finding is by the time that you reach 75, 80 years old, if you do not have dementia, you will not have dementia moving forward. It's something that really begins to affect us in our late 50s, early 60s, and progresses forward. But then as we get older, the chances of acquiring dementia lessen. Also, dementia is not a specific disease. It's a set of symptoms associated with that brain decline that I mentioned above. The other side of this is dementia is not just about memory. So for example, when we talk about people living in an assisted living or going to a dementia community, often it's called a memory care community. That's actually a bit of a misnomer because there are different types of dementia where memory is not affected at all. Things like executive functioning, writing checks, planning a trip, those types of things, that's another cognitive area that is affected with dementia. Language and speech, as I mentioned. Behavior and social skills. Now, some of us have always struggled with that, but there are others that with the dementia that begins to decline. Movement. So when we talk about gait, the length of a step that someone takes, Lewy body type dementia, we notice that the gait really shortens because the person's muscles really begin to atrophy. And there's a lot of falls that occur with Lewy body, but that has to do with the movement. The visual spatial perception, what we also find with that is quite often, as we get older, most of us lose our peripheral vision and it begins to lessen and lessen. So if you take your hands and you put them, and I'm going to ask you to do this right now, go ahead and take your hands and stretch out your arms to your side. Wiggle your fingertips and bring your hands closer together. When you can see both your hands from the side of your eyes, that's your peripheral vision. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is to continue to bring those hands forward until it's right in front of you. This is advanced dementia. With that, people are generally only able to see about the width of a coffee can. And
Wow.
after a while, with some forms of dementia, it actually will become binocular, and this is as much as they're able to see, which is why when people wander living with dementia, they get lost so quickly, is because they can't see around them. That's also why a lot of people fall, or there are things when I help individuals, because I'm a care manager, I help them through the transitions of the dementia, and also their transitions from living at home independently if they have to go to assisted living or if they want to stay at home, how we move the lighting, how we adjust furniture, floor coverings, that type of thing. Like generally we will not put a mat in front of a door, especially if it's dark. If the mat is a dark material, it can look like a hole in front of the doorway. Now to us, we see the dimensions. It doesn't look anything like that, but you think about as, again, the eyesight, there are little things like that that need to be adjusted in order to maintain a quality of life. The updated definition of dementia, what I teach or train on, is dementia is nothing more than a shift in the way a person experiences the world around them. So for example, if someone is hallucinating, or if they imagine there's that hole in front of the door, I always remind the loved ones, pick your battles. That is their reality. It's easier for us to go alongside those we love and join their reality than try and convince them that they're wrong and that there's our way is better. So what I, again, is remind people all the time is what that person with dementia is experiencing is their reality. Just join them, pick the battle. So the different types of dementia and why it matters. Now this particular graphic, this is, the umbrella term is dementia. So what I always tell people is all Alzheimer's is dementia, but not all dementia, as you can see on this graphic, is Alzheimer's. There are, again, I had talked about that 400 that the Alzheimer's Society in Ireland talked about, or the Dementia Society. But there's a reason why this is important, and I'm going to touch on this even more. But if you look at what characterizes each of those dementias, then you begin to understand what someone with frontal temporal dementia is experiencing versus someone with Alzheimer's or someone with Lewy bodies. And these are the most popular. Now, what I will point out is the Alzheimer's disease. It says on this that it's 50 to 60 or 60 to 70% of all dementias. That actually we're finding is not accurate. Alzheimer's is the most known or the most recognized, but in fact, it is right around 40 to 45% of all dementias. Okay. Now, why the different types matter, why it's important to know what you are diagnosed with or your loved one is diagnosed with, is first of all, some dementias are reversible. Okay. Things like, for example, if you're noticing someone is forgetful or their personality is changing, it could be that they are just delusional. And what that means is that they could have a UTI, or It could be the meds, which is the next one below. If you are someone and you have got Lewy body type dementia, you are not able to take the same type of antipsychotics that someone living with Alzheimer's can take. What happens is the brain processes the meds differently based on the type of dementia. So what might work for someone with Alzheimer's, if you give it to someone with Lewy bodies type dementia, it can exacerbate the symptoms that they are experiencing. I actually had someone that I was caring for in a community that threw a chair through a window because they had Lewy body type dementia or given a antipsychotic by their doctor that didn't really understand the variants. Okay. The other thing is that life expectancy with the different types of dementia goes the full gamut. I mean, you can have a Creutzfeldt-Jakob or what they call Pick's disease. Your life expectancy is less than a year. Whereas with Alzheimer's, as I had mentioned before, you can live with Alzheimer's for years before it begins to affect your daily life. And again, there are many people that have lived longer than 20 years with Alzheimer's. So as a family or as the person that's been diagnosed, to understand the type of dementia you're living with, it also will not just the life expectancy, but the symptoms, the behaviors that will be a result or are a result of the dementia. It's also good to know those things as well. So let's look at some of these Alzheimer's. And again, this is going to be on the website. So I'm not going to go through this in vast detail because I want to address some of the things that we can do with our loved ones over the holidays. But again, Alzheimer's, the average duration it says is 8 years. That's post-diagnose. Okay, so that would be after you go to your doctor and say, hey, I'm struggling with remembering things or recalling recent conversations, that type of thing. The doctor's going to conduct different types of tests, and part of that is an MMSE, a many mental state. And let's say that they diagnose you as either possible or probable Alzheimer's, you will have it on the average 8 years before, again, either the disease, you succumb to the disease, or you need advanced care in order to live a quality life. Yeah. Vascular dementia, this is the life expectancy is highly individual. The difference with vascular over other forms of dementia is that second bullet point, the sudden changes. It can be stepwise. So what happens with that is you can be going along, you're doing very well, and all of a sudden you have a change of condition, or your loved one has a change of condition. Before they were able to be, they would participate, they would be involved in conversations. But once you have that stepwise, you're going along and that person, their condition changes, it's like they take a step down, they will plateau at that level until it steps down again. They won't go back to where they were, all right? The Lewy body dementia, that is one of, for me, that's a form of dementia that I spent a lot of time studying with my master's program. Robin Williams is someone that succumbed to Lewy body dementia. And the challenge was he was never diagnosed with it. And instead, what happened is that depression, the irritability, that type of thing, the visual hallucinations began to take over. The other big thing with Lewy body is it is very challenging as the dementia progresses for people to reach REM sleep. So they can go days without sleeping. And I, again, as a care provider, I was in a community where I would have 2 and 3 residents because I worked overnights as I was going to college. I would have 2 or 3 residents up throughout the night. They couldn't sleep. It is a losing battle on my side to try and get them to stay in bed or anything else. I would just let them go, make sure they were safe. I'd enjoy conversations with them, I'd engage, but it was just something they were on, generally a mission. Like they'd go through cabinets or they would go through, the bathroom, and rearrange items and that type of thing. With Lewy body, this particular dementia is the one where more people will leave home and walk outside in the middle of the night or early morning. So if someone is living at home, I work with families and I'll just have to put a bell either on the doorknob or high on the door jamb so you can hear if the person is leaving the house. They're very good, even if you lock the doors, they're very good at, because they have no problem just working on something, a puzzle, until they can get it worked out, meaning they'll unlock the door. I've had individuals try and climb fences, that type of thing. But it's really a matter, it sounds like people with dementia are crazy. That's not it. It's when the disease is taking hold of them during an episode, I'm doing the rabbit quotes. What I talk to families about is, again, join them in their reality, meaning don't raise your voice, don't act like you're afraid or scared or anything else about what they're doing. Quite often they're looking to us for affirmation. Am I doing okay? They don't have a sense of what's proper and what isn't. They just know what their mind or their brain is telling them to do. The other thing with Lewy body, real quick, is that they suffer with, I wouldn't say suffer, they have quite a few hallucinations. And generally the hallucinations are friendly. They're animals or they're children. So what I do with quite often is I'll tell people, if they say, oh, did you see the little girl that came down to the refrigerator? No, I didn't see her. Can you tell me more about her? And that's the question I would advise people to always try and think of first, is ask someone, if someone living with dementia asks you a question, ask them or answer them and then say, can you tell me more about that? Ask them for the details. Because, for example, with the Lewy body, if they have a hallucination, you ask them, can you tell me the details? What color dress was the little girl wearing? What color was the collar? The more details you can ask for, what happens is it's almost as if they're living in a house of mirrors, where as soon as they begin in their mind to focus on the details of that hallucination, the hallucination goes away. And again, because it's not a scary thing, it's something they'll talk about later, and they may see that little girl again later, and you do the same thing. Okay. Frontal temporal, there are 2 different types. Again, the frontal temporal, you got the frontal effects and the temporal effects. Frontal temporal, the challenge with this is that usually these individuals lose their ability to empathize or to be apathetic. So it's really challenging for them to, let's say that they hurt you. They grab your arm or something and you say, ow, that hurt me. They will look at you with a stone-faced look. And it isn't that they're callous per se, it's just that part of the brain will not let them feel what they're doing to someone else. Okay. Um, Usually with this particular type of dementia, they are also disinhibited. So you'll find quite often, I've had residents where they'll come into a room and they start to disrobe. And there's no embarrassment or anything else. They just feel hot and their reaction is, I need to take my clothes off. I had one gentleman constantly taking off his socks and then putting them back on and then taking them off again. But again, it didn't hurt anybody. It didn't hurt him. So we just let him do that. Another thing is you'll notice this last thing, alteration in food preferences. Their taste buds begin to change. So where you have a family member say, oh, dad's always loved chocolate pie. Dad may not like chocolate pie anymore, but he may like cinnamon sticks, in his tea or something like that. Just again, it's always about meeting them where they are and finding, if you don't like one food anymore, what do you like now? And let's do that for a while until that changes. As far as the temporal effects, this is where they really challenge, they're really challenged with being able to speak clearly. I had a woman, for example, that all she was able to say was ma'am. And I'd ask her questions, ma'am, ma'am. What I began to learn is it was how she would use her intonation with the ma'am, okay? Where I could begin to ask her questions because she would also point at things and that type of thing, where I was able to begin to understand that ma'am could be, she was upset about something, or ma'am meaning she was happy. Ends up she had been in the Navy, she was a WAC. And one day I just started singing Anchors Away, and all of a sudden she was able to sing with me. And then after we would stop singing, she'd go right back to ma'am. But at that point, I knew I bonded with her and that she trusted me. And it also meant that she was more patient with me when I tried to understand what she was trying to communicate. Okay, all behaviors are specific symptoms based on the type and the stage of the dementia. So as I've mentioned with Alzheimer's or vascular, the majority of their symptoms are due to unmet needs. Okay, so if you notice that someone is getting irritated, or they're hitting out, and usually they're not hitting at somebody, they're just hitting out at something. You need to find out with them, and it's just taking the time to ask, what's going on? Can you tell me what's the matter? You seem really upset. And give them the room to feel that they can communicate and trip up doing that, but you're not going anywhere. Frontal temporal, those behaviors are mostly internally driven, like the guy with the socks or taking off the clothes. Lewy body, the visual hallucinations are not a result of the care environment, but as I mentioned before, the disease itself. I'm showing this little graph here as far as the different types of stages, because most people want to put dementia in these little boxes. Okay, what stage is my loved one in? What I'm going to explain to you is that stages really aren't the way that I define dementia as people are progressing. I had a professor that's in Las Vegas at a conference, and she presented on how dementia really goes through a trajectory. And what I mean by that is, you think about if you are sketching an arch, okay? When you sketch, you go back and forth as you're creating that design. That is how dementia is with most people. If you're in a stage, you stay in that stage until you move forward. The way dementia actually works is you'll have someone, especially like with Lewy body, for example, that one day their memory is fine. They're communicating. The next day, they're not. Same thing with Alzheimer's. One day they're fully present with you, and the next day they can't form a sentence. So it really acts more as a trajectory, and it goes back and forth as that dementia progresses. Traumatic brain injury. I put this in because of, with veterans, this is very common. It is not a form of dementia, but there has been research done. It really started in 2011 that the research started looking at veterans. Are they more susceptible to dementia as a result of the TBI? The challenge with the research that's been done is that Alzheimer's Association sponsors the majority of the research that's out there. Alzheimer's is not one of the main forms of dementia that we are finding is a direct result of TBI. Instead, it is Lewy bodies, it is cerebral microinfarctions, so that would be more of the vascular, as well as Parkinson's. Those are the ones that are most common, okay? As PTSD, that is Alzheimer's. And it's really what we're finding is it's as a result of the stress that is a result of the PTSD, okay? And stress can exacerbate the behaviors that result from the Alzheimer's, okay? Now, real quick, I've included on this slide at the bottom, hillandponton.com. They have a really good graphic, as you can see here, on how the VA defines dementia and the benefits that you are able to claim as a result. As the dementia progresses, and I will tell you, let's say that you have got Parkinson's and dementia, what the VA will do, for example, is they will give you the benefit that pays the most, whether the Parkinson's or the dementia, whichever one, even if it's, how am I trying to say this? If you were initially diagnosed with Parkinson's and a year later, which is real common, you then develop dementia, they will give you the one that pays the most. So if it is for the dementia, that's what they will work with you on. Does that make sense? So when it comes to how we work with our loved ones through the holidays, now that I've kind of given you a background on the different types of dementia. Once you know the type of dementia, it really comes down to our expectations of how we're providing care or how we think we want the holidays to go for our loved one because they have dementia. Whereas people living with dementia will tell you they don't care. They just want to be with you because they love you. It's the bright lights, the music, the excitement can be overwhelming for them. They really just want to be with those that love them and that will care about them without them having to be self-conscious, okay? So when I was doing my master's, that's what I focused on, is I interviewed people living with dementia to find out what they wanted us to know versus what we thought they should know about their dementia and how they should act. So some of these slides, again, These are some of the communication issues according to the person living with dementia. Whether it's the short-term memory or how they're able to communicate, really all of this comes down to is that people living with dementia, as I mentioned before, they still have a sense of identity. They are still able to feel shame, embarrassment, happiness, love, compassion, all of these things. The challenge is it just takes the majority of them longer, especially as the dementia progresses, to be able to communicate that. Again, if they're beginning to get aggressive, or if you see that they're hitting out and that type of thing, generally that just means that something else is going on. Again, there's a need that is unmet, that is just taking the time to sit down with them and ask them one-on-one, what's going on? Can you tell me more about it? Okay, so the other thing is positive encouragement, helpful cues, gentle reminders. Although I will tell you that with a lot of the majority of the people living with different forms of dementia that I talk with, they have no problem with that positive encouragement and the helpful cues, as long as it's done in a respectful way, and that they don't feel that, for example, that I would be condescending or patronizing with them. You know, I hear quite often, just ask them questions, and give them two choices. Do you want the red shirt or the blue shirt? Well, you know, quite frankly, I always ask a broader question, and if they're struggling, I will begin to reduce it down to, do you want the red shirt or the blue shirt? But I give them an opportunity to tell me, so what are you interested in wearing? You know, I really liked you in that outfit last week, the one that you were wearing, and this is what it looked like. Would you like to wear that, or would you like to wear something else? And then we begin to reduce it down. That way they feel like they are still in control and they're participating and they're choosing what they wear or what they eat or whatever it may be. That's really a big part of how we interact with people living with dementia, is that opportunity to give them a sense of dignity that they're not given as a general rule with the outside world. And also remembering that some people with dementia, some days they're not able to communicate, and reminding them, that's okay. I'm not going anywhere. You take your time. And sometimes it's sitting in silence. So for example, Lewy body, I keep going back to this, and I do like the other types of dementia, but one thing with Lewy bodies is it can take sometimes 30 to 45 seconds for someone to process what you have asked them to do when they have mid to advanced stage or they're further on that trajectory. So what I'm going to do is ask you guys real quick to do something for me again. I'm going to ask you to go ahead, and this is great since you're at home, so nobody's watching you. Go ahead and stick out your right foot and point your right toe, okay? I'm going to ask you to begin to do the alphabet in cursive with your big toe, okay? Let's say that you've always been able to do this. I've seen you do it great. In addition to doing that, what I've also seen you do at the same time, and I'm going to ask you to do this now, is take your right finger as you're writing in cursive. Now I want you to start writing numbers out. And with your big toe, you're writing the alphabet. How's that going for you? The reason I'm asking you to do that is that it is actually impossible. Our minds are not able to do the alphabet in cursive with our big toe and write numbers at exactly the same time. We can alternate and we can start and stop one or the other, but to do them at the same time, our brains are not able to do it. But the reason I'm using this is, let's say you've got Lewy body dementia, and I'm asking you to do something and it feels just like that. It feels like I'm asking you to write cursive with your toe and numbers with your fingers, and you can't do it. And really what I'm asking you to do is put your shoes on. And you can't do it today. And I'm standing over you and I'm saying, come on. We've got to go to the doctor. I need you to get your shoes on. What is going on with you? And I got to tell you, it's real common for family members and care providers to get frustrated. We're human. Okay. But when we understand what's going on with our loved one, it makes it a little bit easier for us to say, you know what? I had trouble today too. I don't know what is wrong with me. You know, we got to get to the doctor. Do you want these shoes or do you want another? Do you want your slip-ons? Oh, okay. You want these? If you don't mind, I'm just going to help you real quick. I know that today is a tough day for you. Are you okay with that? And always asking permission, because they know they're struggling. Now, the other side of this is, again, if I'm asking them to get their shoes on and they're just sitting there, a lot of times what they'll say is, okay. And I'm like, okay, get your shoes on. If they keep telling me okay, what that tells me, because I've got some experience with my loved one, is they're not processing today. So I need to wait 30 seconds before I ask them to do it again. Because if I don't give them 30 seconds, their brain is starting that processing all over again. Each time I say, I need you to get your shoes. Okay. No, I really need you to get your shoes on right now. Okay. And they really mean it. They're not trying to be difficult. Okay. So as a person with dementia, I am struggling to make sense of today, but as my caregivers, you only offer me yesterday. And that's a lot of times where people will say, remember when we went to the store and you did this and that, or remember when I was growing up. And a lot of times they can't remember. They're just trying to focus on today. And so it's one of the things that a lot of trainers will advise loved ones is try not to say the words remember when, because it's really challenging for someone. What I'll do is I'll say, I remember one time you did this, this, and this, and you just made me laugh, and we had so much fun. I love laughing, don't you? And then what happens is they begin to kind of relax a little bit and participate. Now they may say, oh, I remember that. And then we start talking about memories, or we start talking about other things. But if I say, do you remember when this happened? And they don't remember, remember, I just was talking about how people with dementia can feel shame, and they can feel embarrassed, and those types of things that will shut them down. It actually, again, will exacerbate the Alzheimer's or whatever type of dementia they're struggling with. As far as positive interactions, I'm not going to go through any of those, except please take the time to look at these, because these are the things that we are able to bring to the table for them. Warmth, relaxed pace, respect, acceptance, celebrate with them. There's still so much in life to celebrate. Validate them and let them know you still see them for who they are. And they've got a lot to offer. They're also genuine or we can be genuine with them. The one thing about people, especially in communities, that I've noticed is they are very distrusting of care providers until they know they can trust you. They expect to be manipulated or to be told they need to do things, and they will be compliant, but they will be miserable. But if I'm able to meet them where they're at and let them know I like them just the way they are, then they begin to trust, and then that quality of life goes up. I also talked to them about we're always a team. Everything we're doing, I'm here for them. If they tell me secrets or they need to have someone they can trust, a closed mouth friend, I'll be that for them too. And I let the families know because they are more important. They need someone that they can confide in, that they can say, I don't remember, I'm struggling, whatever it may be. And it's generally not the family they'll do that with. It's a third party. And finally, recognition, belong, reminding them that they still belong, and make sure that they have fun, okay? Sense of humor goes a long way when caring for someone with dementia. So as far as social situations and this holiday, pay attention to their nonverbal cues and body language. Give them the reminders and the prompts. If they don't remember your face or they don't remember someone that walks into the room, don't say, oh, mom, you remember so-and-so. Instead, walk up and say, oh, you are my favorite sister, Julie. It's so good to see you. Doesn't mom look good? That type of thing. Allow them time to think and find the right words, and ask them permission if you want to finish a sentence for them or a thought. Remember that they have something to say too, and ask them how they'd like to be helped. Can I help you with this? Are you struggling? Or even ask them, how can I help? There's a thought. Why does any of this matter? This picture is a picture of a woman that I met who is a healthcare provider. And I was speaking in Chicago at the Alzheimer's International Conference. And a few weeks later, she had sent me the picture of her mom on the left-hand side that was a community. The mom wasn't doing well, and she began to isolate, and she wasn't talking. The daughter ended up moving her mom to another community. Another 6 weeks later, that's her mom on the right-hand side. Same woman, same outfit, but what was going on was they were asking the mom, how can I help you? What do you need? They let her know that she mattered and that she still had value. And part of what I do in my job is I help people living with dementia find a new sense of purpose. It can be what they used to think was important, or we find something new together, but that's why it matters. And that's what makes the difference. So final thoughts, we lament the millions of neurons lost to dementia, and we ignore the many millions that work perfectly. And many people have acquired a special type of, I can't see it, that comes from living with dementia. So what we want to remind people is that, or a special type of wisdom, and we want to remind them that their lives are far, far from over, and they still have a lot to offer, even if it's teaching us how to be giving by letting us care for them. So preserve their identity, celebrate their personhood, and create meaning in the moment. By changing our approach, we can produce more well-being for people living with dementia. And people with dementia, and this is the final thoughts, people with dementia continue to learn new information incorporate data and use problem-solving skills, encourage that. The more they use it, the longer they stay present with us. The other thing is, as care providers, we need to be cautious about over-medication of our loved ones. Really make sure that we're talking with the healthcare professionals. But first and foremost, the most important thing is we need to change our minds about people whose minds have changed. We can change, they can't. But if we go alongside them for the ride, it's an adventure and it's worth every moment. Finally, I've just provided some resources, whether you need support or you're looking for different approaches in care. My website is on there as well. And I welcome anyone to call me, reach out, even during the holidays. If you just have questions or concerns and something's going on at that moment, call me. I will walk you through it. Together, we'll get through this in order to help your loved one, which will help you. Thank you. Any questions?
Kelly, I got one. There's a lot of, over-the-counter medications and stuff that tout brain building stuff like that. I'm certain they've done research on that. I mean, is that helpful for the dementia patient?
It's really more helpful before the symptoms of dementia begin to appear. So for example, right now, one of the things that I really push is getting off of sugar, processed foods and that type of thing, and eating a clean diet. It is amazing what that does as far as cleaning up your thoughts and the how the ability to process. And if you can't tell, I ate sugar today. But yeah,
that's what I'm going to blame it on too.
Yeah, well, and things like turmeric and green tea and blueberries and things like that, I encourage people really embrace that. And it is really, it's not a terrible way to eat or to live. It's actually, you'll feel the difference. And you'll feel the difference when you're not eating clean. It's like all of a sudden you kind of feel sludgy, that type of thing. But as in terms of once you begin to show the different symptoms, what's going on in the brain is the neurons are actually being eaten, if you will, by whatever type of protein, the dementia that you're living with. So for example, if it's Alzheimer's, it's tau and amyloid plaque. But what they do is they eat that, what do you call it? Help me out. Dang. The neuron. So once the neuron is gone, it does not replenish. When people talk about neuroplasticity, that means you are developing other areas of healthy and active neurons. But once that Alzheimer's gets that neuron, it's what it becomes what they call a tombstone, okay? And it can never be brought back to life. So if you're looking at eating healthy and doing things, start today. Start making a difference today. That answer your question?
It does a little bit. Obviously, supplements are supplements and medicines are medicines. But what I've noticed with my aging parents and grandparents is activity. And even simple things like games, solitaire and card games with each other, exercise in the mind, or it'll go away on you.
Yeah, and what I encourage people to do, so for example, I do customized games for my clients. So I'll do something like a memory game where I create the memory pieces from things like their alma mater, their the city that they grew up in, the house that they grew up in, you know, as far as the pictures and things like that, the company logo that they worked at. And you play a memory game with that because they can relate to it. And then you can ask them about, you know, can you tell me more about that place or that mascot or whatever? Pretty soon they're not able to they're not able to match those pieces. So then we begin to do things like we'll just turn them so they're all facing up. And we just change the activity as the dementia progresses. But I will tell you, research is showing right now, the research is all over the place, but they're saying things like playing Sudoku and some of these games and all, that it's really not as effective as we think they are. But my thought is, you know what? If it's not hurting, keep doing it, because it'll probably be like, you know, all the studies on cancer. One day something causes cancer, the next day it cures it, or, you know, that kind of thing. Do what feels good and what makes you feel like you're making progress. The other thing is with your parents, maybe have them learn new activities, because they show actually that helps deter memory loss more than just doing the same, like if you play Tetris, okay? If you do that all the time, or if you play piano and you play the same song all the time, pretty soon your brain kind of acclimates to it. So learn new skills,
Kelly, isn't that developing neuroplasticity? And isn't that basically what we're looking at on the brain? Is the brain is functioning in multiple areas in the brain, not just in one. So if one area of the brain's affected, another part of the brain will take over if it's being challenged.
Yes, but I think and that's a really good point, Kip, but I guess what I'm talking about is learning a completely different activity. Or I'm sorry, you're talking about learning a completely different activity, which then does activate a different part of the brain, like that brain that I showed with the different dots on it.
Right.
Yeah. So absolutely that will develop, but I'm talking about, so for example, if you're doing one type of puzzle all the time, go to a different type of puzzle. And it's in the same area of the brain, but now what you're doing is, even though some of the neurons have been extinguished by the dementia, you are developing, but you're having to work harder. And so it's not like you're gaining more memory, you're just keeping what you've got longer. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Neuroplasticity, you are developing new muscles, if you will, whereas what I'm talking about is just keeping what you have longer without changing it. Okay.
So I have a question, Kelly.
Yeah.
Is white brain matter a form of dementia?
It's not a form of dementia, but dementia can take hold in the white brain matter. I actually have a client right now that has been diagnosed. He's got a form of, it's mixed, it's vascular, but white brain matter dementia. So he is someone that, and he deals a lot with multi-infarct challenges and things like that as well.
So it's separate then, or it's like a comorbidity with?
It's a comorbidity.
Okay, all right. All right, I had another question in here and I can't find it. Oh, so there was this area where you were talking about with the different types of dementia, that there is maybe an exhibiting behavior of apathy towards others.
Yeah.
Yet there's all versus, in another segment, you said you mentioned that they may be experiencing shame and embarrassment towards themselves. So there can be apathy towards others, but yet they feel that internally for themselves. Was I getting that correctly, or is it?
Okay, I wasn't real clear because when I'm talking, yes. So when I was talking before about that trajectory,
Yeah.
instead of, where people talk about the stages,
Mhm.
there are days where someone, for example, with that frontal temporal, or let's say that they sundown. So every day around the same time as the sun is going down, they become restless, they become less apathetic, they are grumpy, that type of combative, that type of thing, and they don't care that they are that way. But in the morning or late at night, as you are helping them get ready for bed, they are gentle and sweet and loving and kind. So what's going on is you can earlier in the day be one way and later in the day another. But isn't that the case with most of us? The challenge is with being unable to be empathetic or struggling with apathy is there is no way to draw them out. It's not like we can scold someone or rationalize with them. That is where they are at that moment. They're stuck in that behavior because of the dementia. But then later, again, with the trajectory, again, it goes back and forth. Later in the day, they quote, normalize to what they've always been. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm thinking of people that they go through that manic depressive phase and stages in their lives. And it's like, at some point you need to not just look at it as I'm in a manic or in a depressive phase, but there might be something further going along here than what, maybe the family is recognizing right off the bat.
Yeah. And, again, like something like that, like I had a gentleman really struggle with the depression. And also I've got a client currently that is bipolar and also has dementia. So trying to work with that and understand what is the dementia and what is mental illness. And that's a really good, I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things, and I meant to mention this earlier, is when I'm doing the first responder trainings, they have already received training in working with people with mental illnesses. There is a technique and a process, and that is where you rationalize or help them with the reality of what's really going on around them. Remember, I've talked about dementia, and what I work with the first responders then is you don't do that with dementia. You need to find out where they are by talking with them and that type of thing. And if it is not the mental illness, if it's not bipolar, I had another one at one point that was schizophrenic and then also had frontal temporal. But then you're able to, as you get to know that loved one, you're able to discern, is this mental illness or is this the behavior the result of the dementia? And work with them on either one, where they are. And that's always it, Annette, is work with the person where they're at.
Right. So when families start seeing a change in behavior with the change being a decline of some sort, that's going to be your indicator that something else might be happening.
Yeah.
I'm trying to word it to where it makes sense, but it's so if you're dealing with a parent or a grandparent who has a form of dementia, and then all of a sudden you just slowly start seeing this change of behavior going on, then you don't just attribute it to being dementia is what I'm trying to say.
Right. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest pitfalls that we have as children and grandchildren is, especially if we haven't had the best relationship with a loved one, is thinking that they are doing things on purpose or to manipulate us or to stick it to us type of thing. When in fact, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, a lot of times what's going on, it's like a little kid that's got his hand caught in a cookie jar, and you catch them and they turn around, they kind of smile at you. Well, what they're doing is they are testing to see how we respond. Are they in trouble? Have they, are they doing okay? Because they are not always aware of what's socially acceptable anymore.
Mm.
The
That makes a lot more
ability-
sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. And you guys, I really appreciate your patience.
Well,
That's
And
fine.
too bad you couldn't help me fill in the blanks, though. Come on now.
I eat sugar every day, so I can't help it.
well, and and I think that's really an interesting point, because I do know of a couple of folks that really did not do much sugar in their life throughout their life. And then all of a sudden, right around like between 55 and 62, all of a sudden sugar became a craving for them. And I'm wondering if there is a correlation between the potential of a sugar craving, out of the blue, that just develops out of the blue. I mean, we can't really say anything develops that way, but
Yeah.
in this case,
No, I
it's like
don't know.
all of a
That's a good
sudden,
question.
sugar, and now, like I was talking to a person last night, in an hour and a half, they drank 3 Dr. Peppers, and it's like, oof, that's a lot of sugar to be. And
That
then
is a lot of sugar.
they were wondering why they were kind of flying around last night. But
Yeah.
so I'm just kind of wondering if there is a correlation though between diet. We can see the difference of switching from I'm just going to say an unhealthy diet into a healthy diet. You can feel the effects, but then all of a sudden, hearing what you had to say tonight, when you start noticing people, their diet is declining as well, and it's kind of going on to the other side that's not so healthy, and then things start happening. And some of this also reminds me of folks when they're going through chemotherapy or radiation, and they're going through a cancer diagnosis and treatment, and they get that brain fog. And, because I remember at one point, I couldn't get the word garbage disposal out. So I had to describe it as the thing under the sink that spins around in order for someone to understand what I was saying. And and I remember how frustrating that was for me, trying to get a question out when I couldn't get the words out.
Well, and I'll tell you, I've got a client right now that let's say it's the disposal, but she can't even think of the word sink, goes around, and it is really challenging to try and help her communicate with what her needs are.
Yeah.
But again, it's more important, just like if that was a challenge for you, Annette, I hope nobody made you feel less than as a result, but instead, they helped you without being overly helpful, like you can't handle it either.
Yeah. And it was at a point, I know for me, that I knew it was going to come back. And I would really just ask people to let me, just give me a minute, let me try to put it together. And then, I had that wherewithal about me to know that it was not permanent.
Yes.
But give me that time to get the recall center of my brain going again. And I really had to retrain my brain, so to speak. And I've heard a lot of people say that have gone through that type of treatment. Retraining your brain and the speech centers to get things from short-term into long-term and long-term into processing, and then to be able to verbalize it. It's a challenge.
It is.
So-
And I'll tell you, the other thing too, is you've got a lot of people out there. One symptom for a lot of individuals that are developing or living with dementias, they literally, because of the type of dementia, do not see the decline.
Yeah,
So where you have a loved one that begins to hoard, or with the eating changes, but doesn't notice it themselves. And even when you talk to them, you know, there are family members that will confront a loved one and that person is defiant. Everything is the same. Everything is fine. You're the one with the problem.
right.
And it is truly a medical condition that's going on in their brain. And again, it's a matter of, you can't rationalize, you meet them where they are.
Mhm.
And a lot of times I just make it into, this is my problem, can you help me?
Right.
And I
And that's a
change
good,
the word.
that's a good solution piece right there. And actually that's just a form of conflict resolution, no matter what alleyway you're standing in. That's just a really good way to, it becomes about, I shift myself rather than me helping you to shift and to get into a different space. So
Exactly.
it makes total sense. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you very much, Kelly. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
you taking the time tonight to come on and do this. And I found it to be very helpful.
Good.
And Bettina's
Any other
being awfully,
questions?
Bettina's being awfully quiet over there.
I
We
think
all
she's
set?
stuck on something else.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, thanks again, Kelly. Absolutely good session. We'll get it posted to our site, and we'll have you at our mid-year convention. Looking forward to meeting you in person.
oh, thank you. I'm looking forward to it too. And again, if anyone has any questions as we're going through the holidays, do not hesitate. That's what I'm here for. And I do it because I want you to have a good holiday too.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you, Kelly. And I hope you guys enjoy your holiday is it next week? Next week, right?
Yes, ma'am. Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Soon. I don't know. I haven't bought the turkey yet. I hope they still have them.
Well, if you've got the right members in your family, you don't have to worry about turkey.
Oh,
There you
this is
go.